the word can or not. He's like, wait, can doesn't actually mean can, but it's like cannot, like can. He's just like, how did you all completely switch like the meaning of the word can?
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Correct or Not, and today we're joined with Gaik Ping, and before that, let's just get her to introduce herself and tell us more about her. So tell us more about you.
Hi everyone, my name is Gaik Ping. I grew up in PJ. So I was born and bred in KL, but and then when I moved in 2000 and, well, it was like December 2004 when I was, I think, born in 85, so 2004, correct, yes, bad math. And so I then moved to the state of Georgia, which is southeast in the US, to attend the University of Georgia as a transfer student. So I did my first 2 years at ADP, at Taylor's, and then I transferred here and then graduated after 2.5 years with my undergraduate degree. And so I worked for a year in New York after graduation. And after that, I moved back home to Malaysia actually for 6 months and worked in KL, then at a PR agency before I moved to Beijing, China. And worked there as well, also in different PR agencies for another 5 years. So in 2013, my husband and I decided to move back to the States because he's actually from the United States, and we met in college in Georgia. So we moved back in 2013, spent kind of like a gap year in Georgia, before he got into university for his master's degree in Chicago. And so then we relocated to Chicago, and I've been here since then, still working in PR, very loyal in my industry. So a lot of the moving around, it was kind of like happen chance, but also because of like immigration status and like how difficult it was to stay in the United States. But then also the opportunity came up to move to China. And again, it was really like because my husband, now boyfriend, then moved to China first. And I was like, well, if I can't stay in the US and I'm interested to pursue like a new experience instead of moving straight back to Malaysia, I took the chance. It was after the Olympics. So there was the recession happening in America where people, like me who graduated around that time had difficulty finding jobs, but Beijing, China was hiring because there was such a boom. So it was really great to kind of have like my formative 20s in China, living the expat lifestyle. It was very fun, very exciting, and completely changed my mind to what China is. Also, the food in China is just amazing. Like, you think you know Chinese food, and then like it's just so different there. And then after we got married, like I said earlier, he wanted to pursue his graduate degree, so we moved back to the States. And so ever since, I've been able to go back to Malaysia maybe every other year, usually around Chinese New Year, because that's the best time to see all my family. So yeah, I guess I've been away from Malaysia since end of 2004. Gosh, that's longer than I thought. But I miss Malaysia a lot. And when I first left for college, I remember at KLIA, I just like said bye to my parents and was just like not sad at all, was so excited to leave. And then now every year when I say goodbye, I am fighting back tears. I miss Malaysia a lot. But even though I've definitely am so used to living here by now.
So in your many experiences, especially from jumping to Beijing and then going to America, there are a lot of challenges because from Beijing and America, they're two different languages, right? So how do you adapt? Like when you go to Beijing, do you speak in English? Do you speak in Mandarin? Do you speak in a different dialect?
It's really it's really funny. So when I live in Beijing, and as soon as, because I went to a Chinese primary school, Yokchai, in Taman Mega. So I still had like the basic of speaking Mandarin, but it was primary school. I learned to speak like a 12-year-old's Chinese. So when I moved to Beijing as an adult and having to like be in a work environment, I felt like my vocabulary was so limited. I was like, I don't know how to talk about like the state of like politics or business in Mandarin, but I could only speak about like, hey, let's talk about, what did you do this weekend, or like about, it's like stuff you learn in primary school. And then in English, it was interesting. So because my boyfriend then he's American, and so we also have a lot of friends who are like Americans or British. I also have Malaysian friends there, but it sort of just became that my spoken English was also followed like American English. So I guess I've just been in like more of an American English environment, even throughout Beijing. And when I speak Mandarin there, people usually like look at me funny because they're like, especially in Beijing, the accent is so different from southern China.
It's very thick.
So a lot of times they're just like, are you from the south? And then when I say I'm from Malaysia, they're all like, oh, no wonder, because your Mandarin is like, they didn't say my Mandarin was bad, but my accent was so different. Yeah, but definitely if I meet other like English-speaking foreigners, they would identify my English more as American because that's the language I adapt in. And even now, this is not really the normal accent that I use when I speak at work. I don't know, it's like, it's because I'm speaking to another Malaysian but I'm also not speaking in like total Manglish now, so I think I'm at I don't know, it's
an in-between, you find the sweet spot.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, actually in Malaysia as well, there's a lot of us Malaysians who find it a bit more professional to speak in a more Americanized or Britishized English. So because a lot of us Malaysians feel that our slang and all that is deemed to be very unprofessional. So like having las, having mas, having mes, and all those kind of things, we assume that it's very unprofessional. So a lot of us Malaysians are trying to find that sweet spot between not being too over westernized, but at the same time, having that sweet spot, having that still Malaysian slang in it. So how do you find that sweet spot? Like after so many years of speaking English, even in Malaysia and also overseas, how do you find that sweet spot, especially having this confusion of British English, American English, and also now Malaysianized English? Where is that sweet spot?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on who I'm speaking to. And I guess maybe because, Lena, you have such like proper English as well. And that's why I'm speaking in also like properly phrased English. But, I have a fondness for Manglish. I have to say, maybe when I first moved to America, I also had the same, it's just like, if I speak Manglish, if people don't understand me, then they might look down on me. But I also saw how there's just this difference in perception when I saw how I had like European friends and their English was not great, but it came with their European country of origin accent, and Americans would look at them and be like, oh, it's so like it's like so great, like this person is so I don't want to use the word exotic because it has a very negative connotation to it, but they look at them in such positive light and they're very encouraging. But then, and this is not all Americans, right? It's like some Americans. But then if I speak in my Manglish, I would feel that I would be looked at differently. Similar to a lot of my Asian friends, I felt like if I spoke with, not me, if I saw like my Korean friends, if they spoke with like a Korean accent or Chinese friends, like they're viewed differently. And this really is an issue here about like, oh, what is good and what is good and what is bad. So in that sense, I tried to kind of hide my Manglish and like try to really like adapt into speaking more American English. But over the years, I've just come around to seeing how like Manglish is unique in it's not broken English. It's that we've created a completely new way of speaking, that like a muhiba way of speaking, as corny as that sounds, but it like assimilates so many different cultures and languages that at this point I feel like there should be some kind of pride. But I don't live in Malaysia, so I don't want to be this person and be like, yeah, Malaysians should all like embrace Manglish or whatnot. But I just feel like personally I have a lot of fondness for it because I do think it's unique. It embraces so many different cultures, which is what Malaysia is truly about. And I hope we don't lose it. I feel like even if there is a need that people feel that they have to sound more professional by adapting a different accent or speaking, I just feel like the mastery and the fluency of your language is different from your accent, because I've seen people here in America as well who are foreign nationals and like they can speak good English, and even if it's accented or they don't use all the words properly, as long as they're super confident, they can deliver their message and people have no trouble understanding them and are even persuaded very well by them. And it's not about like your accent or whether it's fully like 100% compliant proper English.
So exactly. So a few interviewees or people who have been on the show also, we have a sense of pride of being Malaysian, and I think that's something that we tend to forget or dismiss sometimes, is that speaking good English does not mean we should just let go of our Manglish pride. Because at the end of the day, we want to speak good English, but good English does not mean forget our laws and forget all these other things. Sometimes in a Malaysian context, if you're speaking to another Malaysian, I think it's perfectly fine to speak in a Manglicized way as much as possible. So with all those experiences and with this sense of pride of being Malaysian and everything, so has it been difficult to adapt to Americanized English during your early years in America?
I think luckily for me, maybe it's because I grew up where, even though at home we spoke Penang Hokkien, my father, he was in sales, so he traveled around a lot, and his family they speak Penang Hokkien, but he also speaks Cantonese. He speaks Mandarin from school. My mom's family speak Teochew, and he can also, like, I don't know where he learned like some Hakka. Apparently he knows how to speak some Hakka, and he also speaks English. So I feel like at home in that environment, my family, we constantly switch from like Hokkien to Mandarin, and then at least I watch a lot of Hong Kong TVB, so I picked up Cantonese that way. And then at school, I had friends, primary school, we spoke Mandarin, but then once we went to secondary school, we spoke English a lot, and then with Malay. So I feel like there is this like fluidity when it comes to language that maybe was really good for me as a foundation. That it's just, it's not you're either monolingual or bilingual, which is what people in America, for most, primary English speakers, that's like what the situation, the environment is. So maybe because of that, when I moved here, I picked up the accent pretty quickly, and it hasn't been too difficult. I remember though there were certain words that I had problems pronouncing, and now it's pronouncing. I can't even pronouncing. Good Lord. Yeah, nothing ironic about that, right? There were words that I had a lot of trouble pronouncing that was because in Malaysia we would say it differently, and it actually took me years, and my husband still makes fun of me when I'm like not conscious and I say it so the big thing, my strongest memory, the first time I came to America, I think it was like when I was just at the airport, the Chicago O'Hare Airport, and I went up to McDonald's and I wanted to get water to drink. And in America it's water, but Malaysia, how do you say it?
Water.
Water, yeah. So I went out to the counter and I was like, can I have water, please? And this lady was like, what? And I was like, water? She's like, excuse me? I was like, and then I was like searching in my mind. I was like, water. And she's like, oh, water. I was like, all right, you know. And then I remember in college, I told my roommate who was, you know, we were putting together a grocery list, and I was like, I need to get some chicken thighs. And she was like, chicken what? It's like, chicken thighs. And he's like, like thighs? Like, what are you talking about? I was like, chicken, like the leg. And she's like, chicken thighs. Like, so the THs I had a lot of trouble with. And it's like the T acids, like the RTS. Oh my God, all those words. And also like world, because I think in Malaysia, we don't say the R's very strongly. And it's like, and then here, it's like, all of a sudden I have to like change the way I pronounce a lot of words. Individual words, I would have problems. And, you know, occasionally I still slip here, or when I'm speaking really quickly, I still slip. But accent-wise, it's not too bad. I think I've been able to be understood fairly well.
Yeah. So that's like a huge point there, because at the end of the day, the words are still the same, but somehow, you know, just from the different pronunciation of water and water and water, you know, because I have these situations with some of my students in pronunciation as well, where they have a huge confusion of like, which is the right word. What if I go overseas? I'm saying water, but they don't understand what I'm saying. So, you know, things like that happen a lot with Malaysians when we have our own set of pronunciation. So like you mentioned, water is American, then we have water in Malaysia, and then we have water, which is British. So it's like, what the hell do we follow? So
the funniest thing, so when I lived in Beijing, a lot of my friends were English teachers, and it's hilarious because they talk about how confused their students are, because the teachers who come through, there's no standardized English. It's usually if you have an American, British, or Irish, or Australian passport. So you have like these American teachers who are like this, if this year you got an American teacher, you learn the American accent, and then next year the teacher might leave, and then you'll get like an Irish teacher. And so my friends would always like joking, they're just like, man, that Australian person just like completely messed up with my students' accents, and then I came back the next year and they're all speaking Australian English. It's just like, what? You know, it's funny. And I remember, I think I met this a friend of mine. He's Jewish, but he grew up in Hong Kong through international schools. So his English was, him and I always talked about this, how like our accents kind of became a bit wonky. Also because our teachers, you know, or like for us, it's not our teachers because our teachers are all Malaysian, but it's more us watching, whether we're watching more British TV or American TV, that influences us. And I remember there was actually one week when my husband went on business trip and I watched a lot of Harry Potter and Downton Abbey. And then when he came back, I started saying certain words in like a British accent, and he just like looked at me weird.
But that gives us a lot of color, and I'm really curious about this because I'm sure you've met a lot of Malaysians who are overseas, and especially in America. Do you find that Malaysians have an upper hand in language adaptability, because we have so much culture and so much experiences in mixing languages? Like we literally would find another word if we don't have that word in English. So even if we go to a mama, for example, and we want we don't go, brother, do you want a drink? It's like, ane, Milo satu, you know, stuff like that. So do you see that Malaysians have an upper hand in language adaptability, or do you feel like it's just a very generic thing where across the board anyone has that?
I think it's more not language per se, but I think the cultural adaptability. Malaysians are definitely, you know, I feel like even I see with my Malaysian friends here, being part of Asia, like Southeast Asia, I feel like when we meet other Southeast Asian, there's like a different sense of belonging, like from the same region, even though it was also like after I left Malaysia where I realized I really don't know much about our fellow Southeast Asian neighbors. I was like, completely shocked at how little I know about them. But then it's like I also feel such kinship to like not only like Chinese, because I'm ethnically Chinese, but also like people from India. Like I always say that Indian food is my comfort food, because it's like you go eat mamak, right? So like when I'm in the US, sometimes I get tired of like eating like American food or whatever that is. It's too broad. I'll like go look for Indian food. It's the same way with my parents too. When they come to the US to visit me, sometimes like they'll get tired of eating food, and I'll take them to eat Indian food, and they're just like, oh my gosh, it's like it's like food from home. And so I feel like that way we actually connect really well with people from a lot of different paths, different origins, or like I remember when I was in university and there were all these different exchange students, and it's like very easy to connect with different people, because it's like, oh, they say they're from this, it's like, oh, I used to watch a lot of like Korean dramas, and I know you watch, like, is it Japanese or Korean dramas?
Yeah, both. Last time I watched a lot of Japanese, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember I connected so well with people from Hong Kong, because I'm just like this TVB nut. And then like people from the UK, we have this Commonwealth connection. And people in Australia are just like, it's because like I have so many friends who moved to Australia, so I think that cultural adaptability is definitely like an upper hand, and if you remain curious and you're like interested, it makes it a lot easier. So not so much in terms of like language, I don't think. It really is individual by individual, case by case. Also depends on what industry you are in. Because I work in PR, it's like my English has to be good, because we're writing so much and we're speaking so much. But if you are in like a different field where it's different in environment or demands, then it's not as important, I guess. But of course you still need to be able to like speak enough to like get into job interviews and have your ideas understood.
True. So like speaking on that, right, on job hunting per se, so do you find that in America, or maybe about yourself, or maybe with friends, do you find that being Malaysian, but even though you can speak well, do you find that there's an issue or challenge for people who are Malaysians going over and finding a job?
I feel like the challenge that I've encountered is definitely more visa challenges.
Oh, okay.
So when I chose to major in communications, I remember my brother was already like, you're not gonna get a visa. Because there is this, and back then it was really hard enough, but now it's even harder. Trump administration, let's not go down the rabbit hole. But it's like the STEM, which is science, technology, something. So people who don't major in those fields, it really is very difficult to find sponsorship.
Right.
It's not only about just like finding a job. I remember actually, with my student visa, I had 1 year to work after graduation, and that year I was desperately looking for a job to stay in America, and I called so many companies. Not called, but like I emailed and got like phone interviews, and then immediately once they asked what my visa status is, and they realized that I needed sponsorship, then I never hear from them again, because these fields also that you choose most likely are companies that don't really have the either the budget or the culture to sponsor immigrants. But if you are working, a lot of my Malaysian friends in Chicago actually are actuaries and consultants. So if you go down that field, then those companies, they have an engine set up with like immigration lawyers and like the money, because it's pretty expensive actually. Or like people in engineering, people who work in technology for sure. Those fields definitely hire more immigrants and are used to hiring immigrants and like helping them with their visa status. But if you major in PR, like just get ready to pack the bags.
So in America, especially because a lot of us Malaysians have this feel of go and live the dream, go and live the American dream, go and fly over and try and get a job there. So a lot of the Malaysians that I know so far have been wanting to keep that in mind. Go to America, live the American dream, get a better job, get better pay, and blah, 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 all these things. So in your opinion, would it be a wise choice? I mean, consider everything right now. Usually the answer would be no. Okay, pandemic aside, maybe Trump also aside.
Yeah.
Pandemic Trump aside. What do you think it'd still be a good idea for people who, like, for example, what you mentioned, those in those specific fields, engineering and what? Do you think it's still a good idea to go to America to try and find a job, or to hopefully look for that American dream?
I would say it depends on what the person wants to experience, right? There is no this is better than that, because I've known so many friends who studied in Malaysia and are like probably more successful than I am, and the bonus is they get to be around their family, which I don't get to, well, except for my brother who's in New Jersey. But so I think the important question is to ask, like, what's important to you? And then the second question is to not be afraid of change. I have friends who did, go abroad and study, and then just decided that it's more important for them to be near their family, especially some of them, once they get married, once they have kids, they decide to like move back. And it, there's no right or wrong. And I feel like Malaysia has so many opportunities that career-wise you're still able to find it. But I think for people who are adventurous and who wants to see the world, I think leaving the nest is a good opportunity if you can afford it, right? And I'm very lucky that my parents gave me this opportunity. My brother as well, my brother helped, pay for it, to give me this opportunity to come and see something that's different. And I feel the same way about like whether it was about coming to America or it was going to China, that I grew a lot in these different places, and it helped me, find more like, what's important to me, what I'm interested in, meeting a lot of different people. So I think for me, it's worked out really well because I just love, constantly learning new things and experiencing different things. And so even when I go home to Malaysia, I'm looking at Malaysia at a very different light, and just trying to experience different things back home as well. Definitely, more open-minded than when I lived in Malaysia and like took things for granted there. But I do think it is good if people are able to do it. Sometimes not just financial concerns, but sometimes it's like if you don't have to care for your parents or care for siblings, then it is good, because I think fundamentally when you're removed from a familiar environment, you have to strive differently. You have to, be comfortable with strangers, and that changes you. And also you become a bit more open-minded, I think. I think sometimes when we first come here and people, they're just like, where's Malaysia? Like, what? Like Singapore? Or, and some people get a little offended by that. But then you think more about like, well, how much do I know about America? I felt like, back then, I know a lot of America, and like watched a lot of American TV, but I come here and it's different. And even now with so much happening in America that, the news travels globally, of course, and people in Malaysia, sometimes I see on Facebook, they'll make comments about America, and I'm just like, you don't like have any idea what you're talking about. So I think that once you leave your nest, it makes you aware of how little you know.
True.
And I think it for me, it had a humbling effect where instead of always passing judgment, it's more like about asking questions.
All right, awesome. So at the end of the day, I think, with everything aside and everything like that, so far I believe that the message here is to, if you have the chance, if you have the opportunity, and if you have the resources, go out, explore, gain some insight, and of course at the end of the day, broaden yourself as a human being, and be a good use to society, essentially. So yeah, if you can, benefit the country that you're going to, go ahead. And if that benefits you as well, that is a huge surplus. So just before we end this session today, I just like to point out one thing. So earlier you mentioned that you often had to switch a lot in your languages or in your English, particularly to who you're speaking to. And I think not only Malaysians, but people who are exposed to different sorts of English speakers would have to do that. So could you tell me more about that? And of course, that term that you use in, that thing.
So in America now, because there's like a heightened awareness when it comes to diversity and inclusion, the company I work with too, we have like a lot of education, a lot of programming around what it means to be a diverse workplace, what it means to be an inclusive workplace. So this is a term I learned last year, which is called code switching. It's basically how people switch between accents and also the way they talk to fit in to a particular group. So for like Malaysians, the most obvious thing is we drop our Manglish, we drop our las, we stop using words in certain ways, and then we either speak more of an American accent or a British accent. But in America, so like many of my African American colleagues also say they switch the way they sometimes speak at home or with like their friends, and then at work, because there is this sense of this is more professional English or like professional language, and this is how you switch. So they switch, and then that way you lose your self-identity and you lose your pride, and you just try to like fit into this mold that's, I can go down a rabbit hole about this whole like racial justice issue that we are like talking about so much these days in America, because it's very tense right now, to be honest. So it's made me question how much of me also assimilating in this way, is there a positive outcome or is it a negative outcome? And I think the positive outcome is like, I feel more like I belong, people don't look at me funny, people take me seriously. But a negative outcome is, by doing this, I then also conform and say, yeah, because Manglish is inferior, right? Or like, I don't speak so much of my, like Mandarin or something, and so that is inferior and this is superior. So there's a lot of questions about this, but I don't know, it's still being debated on like what we should do. But like code switching is real, people do this all the time, and I do it all the time. It's like, you put me in a room with my colleagues and it's like, I speak more of an American English, and then immediately I switch rooms and I see my Malaysian friends and like, it's different.
So how do you distinguish, if you could give like a sort of mini clip of how you would switch from Manglish to very strong Americanized English, and then after that, a very middle ground. So how would you do that? Like, what is the common thing?
I would say probably the way I've been speaking this entire time is more of my neutral in between. I think it's been that this is my default in between, which I don't even know who I usually speak to in this accent. And if I switch, it's like, hey Lina, like it's so fun to talk to you today. I've been waiting for this for a long time. I'm so happy to see you, I cannot wait to see you when I come back to Malaysia. So this is more Manglish, right? Even though I didn't use any las.
That's true. Actually,
the other word that my husband loves that he picked up when we first heard was the word can or not. He's like, wait, can doesn't actually mean can, but it's like can, cannot, like can. He's just like, how did you all completely switch like the meaning of the word can? Because no one ever uses that in the way here. Now I'm trying to switch back to so what is more my day-to-day American accent here with my work. So like this is harder, which is weird because this is my default speaking space. Maybe it's like, I'll try to introduce. So here in America, people call me GP. So I work in PR and I specialize in employee communications. And on a day-to-day basis, I work on different clients ranging from the healthcare industry to a candy company to IT. And what I help companies do is I help them find relevance between what the business goals are with what is important for employees for purposes of retention and engagement, because happier and more engaged employees generally result in more loyal employees. So it's like a little mild, I guess, but that's how I would speak more of an American English.
Mm-hmm. So like to very much, to illustrate how the transition works for our audiences back home, is that from accent 1, 2, and 3, from our very Malaysianized accent all the way to the very Americanized accents. Our Malaysian accents tend to be very hard T's, very front of the mouth sounds. So it's like, hey, you sure can or not like that? Hey, really lah? This like this one lah. So it's very front of the mouth versus Americans or Americanized English is very back of the mouth. So are you sure this is something that's possible? I don't think this is something that's possible. So even from can or not, sure or not to I don't think this is possible. So even words.
It's funny because sometimes when I like see, I'll start just like saying one word or thing, and my husband will be like, "Can you use full sentences?" Like, cat,
cat,
Duan, like, what? Yeah. This is your specialty, so I appreciate you. I was like, oh, I've never thought of that, but. It does sound more, even when I think I'm speaking American accent, it's interesting because I did a webinar the other day and then it was recorded and I had to listen to the playback. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, wow, I like do a lot, very like much harder sounds. And I was like, oh, huh.
Like, huh. Yeah, so at the end of the day, language is meant for us to communicate with one another, and instead of like trying to push an accent or American or even British accent into our languages or daily lives, it's just easier to go with whatever that's comfortable. And if we were to have a professional English, I think it's just to use enough grammar, proper intonation, proper stress and stuff like that. So I think we could agree that it doesn't need to be a specific accent, because at the end of the day, no English is correct, because we have British, Irish, Australian, as you said. So it's one big whole mess of confusion.
And even in America, they have different accents in different regions. So when I went to the South, please, like, if Southern accent is so beautiful, I think, like the accents they have on TV most of the time are just really terrible Southern accents. Let me just clarify that. Just terrible Southern accents. So, the way they enunciate their words, everything is very different. And then once you go, I think what we're used to is we call like TV English. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of very blunt, because even if you go to New York, the New Yorkers have such a distinct accent. Like they'll say like coffee, like I can't even imitate, but the New Yorkers have such a distinct accent from the rest of America. Mm-hmm. And then the Midwest, the first time a friend from Minnesota, he said, bag, do you want a bag? And I was like, what? You want a bag? And it's like, a bag.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so different ways, so a bit more subtle, mm-hmm. Not so much maybe like an accent change, but definitely it's different in America as well. So like, don't need to be so self-conscious about accent, because there's no standard accent.
Yeah, exactly. So at the end of the day, it's meant to be understood. So there's so many ways to convey a message. So you could speak in your own language, in your own accents, and if all that fails, body language always helps. So that's about it for today. So first of all, thank you so much, Gaik Ping, or what I'm very commonly call you as Ping Tete. So thank you so much for your insights, and definitely I think it really helps us to understand a little bit more on how you would have to adapt and at the same time, be in a very different country and speak the language, even though we are brought up in this language as well. It's so different. And as you mentioned, it's also different for Americans who are living in different states. So at the end of the day, I guess, we would like to learn how to adapt, but at the same time, having that sense of culture and that sense of pride of being a Malaysian and having our Malaysian accents is what would, give us that sense of...
For me, it's like a sense of belonging, it's like, it's our heritage. So
yeah, a sense of belonging. That's right. Yeah. So maybe just another, any last quick words before we end today's session?
Definitely everything you said, I agree with, and I feel like a lot of times it's people sometimes they're very shy and afraid of making mistakes because they're afraid of their judgment, and a lot of times that kind of impedes them when their English is much better than they think it is. So, it's just, I think I've seen people who don't have that standard accent, but they're so confident that, they're similarly captivating when they speak to an audience, even when there is, some grammatical errors sometimes. Of course, it's better if but, it really comes down to like your confidence and what you're saying, right? So yeah, just, but of course it's important to also just work hard and, you can learn different pronunciations. That way you can say different things to different people and just have fun with it too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So at the end of the day, of course, there's no such thing as like so much pride as to not go out and learn. So, but at the same time, find that same balance where you can go and enjoy people's company and enjoy people's experiences, different cultures. So if we are so stuck and so rigid about having our own accents and pushing it through, it restricts us from actually learning other people's cultures as well. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I really, really appreciate it for all that, all the time that you spent. And with that, take care and good night. Have a good night's rest.
Good morning to you.
Yeah, and good morning to us here. So if you like this video and you would like to see more about it, go and check out the descriptions below. And if you'd like to know more about Gaik Ping, you can contact her. Maybe she'll put out her Instagram or something at the bottom there. So with that, thank you all very much. Make sure you like and subscribe to this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.